Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Common Council meeting. Roll call, please.
Fire. Paschal.
Yes.
Rosendich.
Yes.
Bargender.
Here.
Wagner. Here. Witzel.
Here.
Fisher.
Yes.
Barrows.
Yep.
Budke.
Yes.
Endler.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Item C, public comment. At this time, the mayor will recognize members of the public who have indicated their desire to address the council. Upon recognition by the mayor, persons may address the council from the podium. First stating their name and address, the council may take action on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Anyone from the public wish to address the council? All right, seeing no one, we will go on to item D, complete review from May 28th meeting of proposed CIP projects by department. Next up is Chief Grams of Police and Emergency Management.
Thank you. We're on page, I believe, 164, if you're following on your tablets or computers, but we have a total of, I guess, 5 line items, but in actuality, there's seven total items. There's 3 in the siren replacement. As you'll see, our weather warning or emergency sirens, we replace those every 15 years. We have 3 that are slotted to be replaced in the next 5 years. Each of those run about $18,000. Where that money comes in is that's the cost of the new siren, removal of the old siren, installation of the new siren, and then there's 6 batteries as a battery backup for those sirens. The locations of those replacements are Wood at Hillside Cemetery, Palmetto and Daggy, and then 5th and Sycamore. Rough estimates, and they've been fairly consistent year after year, is about $18,000 per unit. Next is the police department roof replacement. Our current roof was installed in 1999. We were given roughly a 10-year warranty, which has long expired. They said that the life expectancy of that roof is about 15 to 20 years, which would put us right now at 21 years. We did have that roof inspected last year by Mauer out of Marshfield here. They said that we should be able to get about another 5 years out of that roof. They did make some minor repairs to that and reinforced a couple of areas that they thought were possibly weak spots. But we do have that roof listed for replacement or total replacement in 2025. We were able to push it back there. And one of the reasons we had looked at pushing it back was first to obviously make sure that the roof was still in quality shape, but then also to ensure or to give us time to determine what we're going to do with the police department. We've had some conversations over renovating and such and staying at our current location, but without knowing any, having any architectural look or drawings up of what that would be. We didn't want to necessarily be replacing that roof. So Mauer thought that we could get another 5 years out of it. Next, you'll see a couple of vehicles are listed on here. Our investigative vehicles, we replace those out every year. We have a total of 6 investigators. The way that we work it is our drug investigators get a vehicle, new vehicle, they keep it for 2 years, and then they transition that to a general investigator. That general investigator keeps it for about 4 years. In that time, we've been averaging roughly 70 to 80,000 miles on each vehicle. Based on this rotation, which we've been doing for, I think, 4 years now, it has worked out well for us with that 1 detective vehicle replacement each year. We put a 2% inflation increase on that. That's what we received from the local dealerships as to what we could anticipate each year on vehicle inflation was about 2%. Next item is a PD ordnance vehicle. We replace the ordnance vehicle out about every 7 years. They don't run 24/7 like our squads do, so the number of miles that go on them is not as does not accrue as fast as with our with some of our patrol vehicles. This one as well, we have slotted for replacement in 2022. that would put our current vehicle that's going to be replaced kind of in that area of high mileage. I think it's right at about 75,000 miles current. And again, that one also has a 2% inflation increase on that per year. Then the last item we have is our patrol squads. Historically, the vehicles weren't in CIP. I think we were instructed to move them into CIP probably about 2 or 3 years ago. So that's why you've started seeing them in CIP. We replace 3 patrol squads every year. We have a total of 9 frontline squads. That includes our K9 vehicles. But we replace out 3 vehicles per year. We've been averaging about 27 to 35,000 miles on each vehicle. They run 24/7. They're used, they're not take-home vehicles. They're used by multiple officers. These vehicles actually have an inflation rate of 3%. And why we put that in there is because the price you see to replace each vehicle actually includes all of the equipment that goes into that vehicle. Some of it we reuse, some of it we don't. It includes the installation of all of that equipment into the vehicle, because when we buy these vehicles, we buy them pretty much off the lot, bare bones, and we have all of the cage, the radios, the lights, the light bar, the rifle racks, all of the equipment gets installed into each vehicle, stays in there for 3 years. We replace some of it out if we have to. Some of it can be, so sometimes you see a savings in there because some of that money wasn't spent because we didn't need a new radar unit for that vehicle. We didn't need a new camera system for that vehicle and such. But with the increase of equipment, which has about we were told a 5 to 10% inflation rate per year on a lot of our police electronics and equipment. And based on the 2% of the vehicle inflation, we just put it at a rough 3% inflation per year. So that's why you see that dollar amount going up for each year over that course of 5 years. As the last item, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the chief? Mr. Wagner.
Chief, have you and the Fire and Police Commission talked about a strategic plan for, do you know what you want to be and what your needs are going to be in 5 years? Are you starting to plan for that other than the vehicles and the roof replacement? I mean, just in terms of what the department itself, in terms of number of personnel, structure of personnel, the whole thing. Have you done that yet, or are you in the middle of it?
We did, actually. We performed a 5-year strategic plan, I want to say in 2018. I think it's a 2018 through 2022 strategic plan. I'd be happy to share that with this body. I think we had completed it probably about right around the same time the fire department had completed theirs. So about maybe 6 to 12 months, a little bit more than probably about 12 months before the city's strategic plan was kind of beginning, is when ours had been finalized and had been approved by the Police and Fire Commission. In that, we had some staffing increases, not necessarily to the patrol division, but to our ordinance department. We had looked at possibly the need of an additional ordinance officer in our records management, or in our records department, a records specialist, or another secretary or clerical position. And we had also looked at, obviously, a lot of the infrastructure needs that we were going to potentially be needing within our current facility, whether we renovated or not. The boiler system is very old. A lot of the things have maintenance on them, annual maintenance, but a lot of them are beyond their life expectancy. So a lot of that anticipatory costs or studies to see what those costs would be of replacing that boiler out, replacing out, obviously the generator was replaced out last year because our other one had failed. But we did do that, yeah.
So essentially you're not outgrowing that building within this 5-year span, or you don't think you are?
I believe we have outgrown the building. We've done some renovating inside to it to make it, I guess, as usable as possible. Our old dispatch center, we turned into a detective bureau, and pretty much the detective bureau takes up the whole lower level of our police department. Obviously the garage renovation has been on CIP for, I want to say, probably 12 to 15 years, as far as needing to expand our garage, because we have 5 garage stalls and we have upwards of 9 frontline vehicles. We did acquire the old Baltus property, and that has allowed us to store a lot of those detective vehicles that were normally parked in the central lot, or that lot just south of the police department. They're always parked outside in the elements, summer, winter. We've been able to put those into the Baltus property, as well as our armored rescue vehicle and various other, we have one or two training vehicles and such that officers take to if they go out of town for training. So a lot of those vehicles we've been able to reallocate or reposition over to the Baltus property. But internally, yeah, I mean, we've outgrown it as it relates to space to store evidence, office space. Each of our offices are shared by two officers. So sometimes they're talking over each other if one's on the phone and one's trying to dictate a report. So sometimes they have to time when they come into the station to do a report or to make phone calls or to return phone calls, or a lot of that they just do out in the squad, which isn't the most convenient location to have a home office, but I guess it works when other offices are busy. So I know a lot of that is discussed or would be discussed once we talk about building expansion and such. But do we need anything? I mean, for the next five, I mean, our timing, the time it takes us to respond to calls for service isn't going to change whether we have a new building or not. Our service to the community isn't going to change whether we have a new building in the next 5 years or not. We're making do with what we have.
I guess my concern is, when are we going to start planning for either renovation or new building?
I know that we actually brought that up recently at a staff leadership meeting, because part of the strategic plan was by second quarter of 2019 was to maybe have some blueprints or a schematic of what a new building would look like and what that cost would be. That was what the timeline was. We didn't meet that timeline. I did have a conversation probably about a month ago with Dan Kanak, and we did revisit that and talk about, okay, well, when are we going to hire that out or potentially look at that? But there's a cost that comes with that drawing or those schematics. So that's kind of where the conversation stopped. But it is in the strategic plan for the city as well.
Not to see anything like that within the next 5, any expense for that type of activity within the next 5 years.
It was talked about, and maybe Steve can chime in on this. It was talked about when we were preparing this strategic plan or the CIP projects. It was talked about. It was said to be put on an off year with the pool happening and the library still being paid for and the renovations that happened at City Hall and such. It was said to be put on an off year, I believe, Steve. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's on a 9-year right now. And Ed, I know you've been around since we talked about this idea of doing the so-called generational projects once every 5 or 6 years. We're doing the pool project in late 20 now into 21. And, we've got a 5-year financial plan that shows we've got some borrowing challenges, but clearly either renovation and expansion of the police building where it is right now, or something else needs to be done after that. That'll be the next project in the queue. But what year that is, I don't think we're quite sure yet. But, we do need at some point to do what Rick is talking about and begin working on plans for what that'll be, because the council did decide. They didn't go as far as, we were hoping in 2019, and Rick just mentioned that. But the council did go as far as to determine that they want to stay on the existing site and do an expansion and a renovation of the existing building rather than to buy a new site and build elsewhere. So at least that step was taken, even if we didn't get a lot farther.
Yeah. Well, Chief, it's refreshing to hear that it's certainly not going to affect your performance in staying in the building. So thank you for your candor.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. The roofing, it says here it's single ply membrane. I'm assuming a rubber roof. Is there any other option? Because that doesn't seem like a real long lasting option. I mean, you've stretched it, obviously.
25 years?
We have. I guess it's a flat roof. I don't know. I don't have the background and that to know what the other options are.
Yeah, I'm guessing with a flat roof, you probably are pretty limited. I know that for more traditional roofs, a steel roof lasts much longer, but I don't think that that's necessarily an option for your building.
I know with part of our building was meant to be solar heated or solar efficient. And if you noticed last year when Mauer came out, we also hired a painter because there was a lot of the sloped areas of our roof that were obviously in disrepair and needed to be repainted and sanded or grinded down. And that all happened as well. So with Mauer coming in, making a couple of repairs and with some, I guess, refinishing of that more for aesthetic purposes probably, but we haven't experienced recently any leaks. We did actually through the previous solar panels, we noticed that where the solar heat would come in and heat rocks that would heat the water pipes and such, that was leaking at one point quite a bit, probably about 2 years ago, and we were able to have somebody come in and repair that because it was leaking into a closet space and then back into a record storage room, which is obviously fairly important to keep those records dry. But yeah, I mean, it's not I don't know what the life expectancy of the building was meant to be when they opened it in 82. I don't know if, what is that, 28 and 40, we have 48 years, no, 38 years old. I don't know what,
Going to the ribbon cutting, it doesn't seem like that long.
Right. Yeah, 38 years old. So, obviously, many other buildings in town have lasted much longer. And like I said, I mean, the foundation of this building is good. That's just at 38 years old. I mean, there's probably a lot of infrastructure replacements. I mean, we have doors that are rusting. We have some windows where the seals have failed, I mean, so.
And so you're really not even looking to do this right away. This is down the road a ways, this project.
The roof or
Yeah.
The roof itself, yeah, but we're going off of what we were told by the roofing professionals and what they thought we could get out of it. Knowing that they only put a 10-year warranty or guarantee on the roof and we're now at 21 years. There's a lot of important documents and a lot of important equipment that we store within that building that we need to make sure that roof is definitely going to last.
And with the council's recommendation after the space study and location study that occurred, this, if I remember correctly, kind of seeing what was a potential addition, this roof wouldn't be affected by that. So investing the money wouldn't be a loss. With putting a second story on, it's going to be, that roof is going to still be a roof, even with an expansion, because the expansion would be going southeast, if I remember.
Right, south and west. I think towards okay. Scotty's there, towards Chestnut.
Not toward the alley at all, just toward, okay.
No, well, we don't know, I guess, because we don't have the drawings performed yet, but it always could. I mean, they would have to pretty much vacate that alley and potentially acquire some of that parking lot that is currently privately owned to the east. We could go to the west up to the sidewalk, which is all, PD property. We had talked about going to the south, obviously, and then maybe making up some of that parking if the Baltus property was demolished at some point once, new construction happened. So we really wouldn't be losing parking in the downtown area if we did expand to that south. But I really don't know. I guess I don't even know if an architect would come in and say we may expand. Maybe we could add a second story on top of that flat roof if the structure was appropriate, and then then it could be a waste.
Oh.
So I guess until I would hear something. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if all we do is expand and just renovate inside and don't really go up on the old area, the existing roof, repairing it would not be affected.
Okay. Couple quick other questions. You're talking about 3 new squads every year.
Correct.
What happens to the old ones?
Depending on the mileage, we'll either trade them in towards a lower cost on the new ones, or we sell them at auction. That money has been being put in a fund, and as that fund builds up, the plan is to use some of that money to offset maybe the cost of 1 squad a year or something like that. But yeah, they are either auctioned or traded in. Sometimes if one has maybe lower miles, we'll sometimes trade it over to one of the school resource officers because they usually get the higher mileage squads, anywhere from 80 to 90,000 miles. They don't put a lot of miles on, so they can last probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 years with the squad. But they probably put about 2,500 to 5,000 miles on each year. So depending on how many miles it is, we sometimes transition them and still use them.
And one of the things you had mentioned a number of years ago, the shifting of types of squad, going from a car to a truck, maybe a pickup, whatever, that the resale was expected, and you're finding that the resale is, again, higher like it was expected to be?
We are. We haven't gotten rid of any of our Explorers yet that we have. We did, one of our pickup trucks had been involved in a crash, and It was going to be replaced out later that year, and insurance paid us, I believe, $22,000 for that pickup truck. We had paid, I want to say maybe $31,000 for it, and it had about 70,000 miles on it, 73,000 miles. So yeah, I mean, previously when we would have a Impala or one of the sedans, we would buy them for about 25 to 26,000, and we were probably getting 3 to 4,000 on resale or on auction. Now, with the trucks and the SUVs and their all-wheel drive and such, we do anticipate getting into that maybe mid to upper teens with some of them, maybe even in the low 20s, like with some of the trucks. We are able to buy them at a reduced cost at a government pricing. It does, I mean, but in 3 years, quite a bit of wear and tear is put on them, so that does depreciate them a little bit.
Okay. And one of the things we've had in a couple of years ago and so on, that obviously you didn't touch on at all, because I'm assuming it must be resolved, is the communication situation. That's completely done? Towers and radios and equipment, all that, that's all done?
They're working well. I think that's on I'd have to ask Ron, but I think it's on a 10-year payment plan. So that's, the money I think was, it was pretty much a finance deal that happened with that, with the towers, both for the police department, the fire department, and the purchase of radios for each agency. Maybe it was a 5-year plan. I'm trying to remember, right? I can't remember, but yeah,
Everything's working well.
it is very well. Yep.
What do you think?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Budke.
Yeah, just to add on to what was said about the roof, I think, hopefully it's going to last that long. It sounds like it might, according to what Mowers told you. But I would like to see some plan as we get closer to that date. You mentioned we're not sure what the layout's really going to be. So I just don't want to spend money on the roof if it's going to be covered up. So I think we should come up with a plan before we do that roof to see what would work best for the police department and us as well, so we don't waste money.
I agree.
Anything further for the chief? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is stormwater.
Good evening. The first project we have on the list is the Colonial Laird Easement Storm Sewer Project. And this is to put storm sewer in a residential neighborhood where we have currently a ditch with riprap. This project was originally slated for 2021 and has been pushed back to 2025. The second project is East 17th Street, Maple to Peach, storm sewer with paving. And this is part of that 17th Street project that we've been talking about as a companion project. The next one is Stormwater Master Plan Update. The city received a grant here this year for $50,000 towards a revamp of our master stormwater plan. The state has just implemented the TMDL for the Wisconsin River system, and will need to comply with new requirements by the EPA and the DNR, and this will help us plan for that. The first 5 years is planning, and then from there on is implementation and trying to achieve the goals of that TMDL. The next project I have on here is the Becker Maple Cedar Storm Sewer Reconstruction. We discovered a storm sewer pipe this summer that has a large rust hole in the bottom of it, and it goes a fairly decent distance. So we're looking at some options of trying to rehab that here with next year. Those are the items that I have right now on the storm sewer. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Nick?
Thank you. I'm disappointed to see the project at, what is it called? The
Colonial Laird?
Colonial Laird
Trust me, I'm disappointed too, because I'm going to get that phone call soon.
Yes. For you, those of you that don't know, this is a small project. It's nothing huge, as you can see by the cost, $35,000, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But it affects that neighborhood. It's a nice neighborhood. There's beautiful homes there. There's one vacant lot that's right next to this easement project, or this project, that, there's no reason for that lot to be vacant. Someone could have built on it a long time ago, except that there's a large canyon there full of rocks and debris and weeds. And I'm sure that is one of the reasons why we're not collecting more money from that property. I've been watching this since I got on the council, and I understand it's something that predates me even. It had made its way up to 2021, and now it's bumped back to the end of the line. I'd like to see it move back up to where it was.
Anything further? Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, you show total expenditures for this year, 265,000. And basically you show $50,000 in grant. What's the grant for?
The stormwater master plan update?
So, yeah, so you're planning on, so that means you're planning on funding the other 50,000 out of long-term debt?
Yes.
I would be remiss if that's not one of my pet peeves, and I didn't gripe about it. I don't think we should be paying for operational costs out of long-term debt. And here endeth the gospel.
Anything further? Nope. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next up, streets.
That'll be me if you just give me a second here. I'm doing double duty for a second back here. Okay, I'm filling in. We have both Dan and Chris gone on vacation this week. I think Kurt may be in the room there to answer questions if there's follow-ups on these. But you see 6 projects listed under streets for the coming 5 years. The top one is the annual seal coat and crack filling project. We allocate $400,000 a year to that work. And I always try to, as an analogy, compare street work to dental work, and maybe that's flawed, but you know, one of the things you want to be doing is the regular maintenance, and you want to be taking care of the crack filling and the seal coating and those types of projects to try and minimize getting to the bigger things, which is the need ultimately to do some asphalt resurfacing, mill and overlay, and then finally at some point, what you never want to get to unless you have to, which is total reconstruct. So we want to do the maintenance, and we want to keep allocating $400,000 a year if possible to keep these streets maintained well. The next several items are about the street building, and I think you know that we're in the middle of a study right now on the street facility. It's a 2-part study, if you remember. One is, what is the current condition of that building? What are the needs of the street division building going forward for the next 5, 10, 20 years, whatever, that we need to be tending to in terms of maintenance and upgrade. The other part of it is, of course, something we've talked about from time to time, and that is the long-term future. Do we want to stay at this location, or is it possible that we would either outgrow it, or that there might be a better place to look at for operating the street building? And of course, that would require either acquiring or using a site that we already have control of. And the hope is that later this summer, Dan Kinect will bring from the consultant to the Board of Public Works and to the council the report for us to look at. And at that time, we can study the results of both parts of that study, the current maintenance and upkeep needs, and then, of course, the long-term possibilities that we might want to talk about. But the first 2 items are both related to replacing the roof of this building. It's nearing the end of its useful life. And you see for 2021, we're looking at the west half. It's the main office building, and that is $125,000. And then the following year in 2022, you're looking on the heated vehicle storage area of the building. And so, you know, combined, it's almost $250,000, which is a lot, but it's one of those things that you need to do when the time comes. And we think that whatever comes out of this study, we think that we're probably going to have to buy some years out of this building. Next project is the electrical service upgrade. The service has been added to over the years. It no longer meets all the electrical code requirements. And we'll be looking at installing a new 800 amp service and a 400 amp breaker panel, 2 400 amp breaker panels to the garage campus. And I think this is kind of what happens when you have an older building, that you kind of cobble things over time. You make work what you need to make work, but at some point, especially when you're looking at code issues, you need to bring yourself into compliance and kind of stand up and get it taken care of. This would be $55,000 from in 2023, and that would be from the M&E fund, the internal service fund. It went a little faster, hang on. The next item is that vehicle and equipment fund. Again, those of you who've been on the council for a while know that we have an internal service fund, ISF we call it, where parks, public works, streets, we pay into it regularly in terms of, and essentially financing was ultimately going to be replacement of vehicles and equipment. So these departments, as part of their budget, are paying in, and then when the time comes that a vehicle or a piece of equipment reaches the end of its useful life, there's dollars there to be able to make those purchases. As you can see, we're planning on the next 5 years spending $650,000 a year from this fund to upgrade equipment and vehicles. And but we have a strong balance in that account, and 650 is actually not very excessive in terms of pushing the limit on what we can afford for replacement. So those decisions are made based upon need, and but just keep in mind that we really want to keep up and keep good quality vehicles and equipment. And then finally, going back to the building itself, looking at doing some tuck pointing. It says that the original building dates back to the 1940s, and looking at $100,000, which again would be funded through the M&E, through the Internal Service Fund, and that's something we need to keep the brick in good condition on that building. So, like I said, I can try and take questions. I think Kurt may be there. Again, I'm not in the same room with you guys, but we'll try and address or answer any concerns you might have.
Any questions? Questions from Mr. Budke?
Yeah, I'm disappointed that seeing how we're going to be having that facility study, and then we have next year spend all this money. I would like to see, and Kurt, maybe you could enlighten us a little bit on that. But I was impressed with the police department that they got a firm here to look at the roof to see what they thought if it could last. Is the roof a real dire need? I mean,
Yes, it is.
you don't think they could make it last?
Right now, we're getting leaks probably 2-3 times a year. Mowers has to come back in and repair them. The last time they were in, when it was replaced, it's probably 25 years old already or better. But the last time they were in, they took a good look at it, and there are major portions of it that are coming loose.
And I do understand that, but if I don't know when and if we would get to a different site or not, but whenever that is, I mean, the warranty is going to probably be 20-year warranty when they do it. We're going to throw a roof away basically, because we don't see the old part of that definitely going to stand if we go somewhere else, and probably not the whole works. So I'm taken back a little bit on that I would like to see that pushed out. I understand what you're saying. You got to take care of that part of it, but I want to see this facilities, see if we have enough space here, if we're going to stay there and plan something. And even the electrical, unless there's a huge problem there, you know, that's not that much money, but still, if we're going to be throwing the building away in a few years, that seems foolish to me. I guess.
Can I jump in for a second, Tom?
Yep, go ahead.
You're asking a really good question, but don't forget, if you want to do the math for a second, you know, we only do a larger project once every 5, 6, maybe even in some cases 7 years. So if the police station is really the top priority, and we're looking at doing that 5 or 6 years out, even if there's consensus that we want to, let's say, relocate the street division to a more appropriate location in the city, we'd probably be looking at least 10 years plus out. So it's not like you're not going to get value for roofing and electrical improvements. You know, if you knew for sure you were moving, maybe you'd try and hobble through, but it's going to be at least a decade, I would think, before we'd be relocating if that happens.
Yeah, and the tuck pointing, Kurt, what about that?
There's brick falling off. You got to be careful.
You're giving me reality. All right.
Anything further from the council? Nope. All right. Thank you.
Bob, can I jump in with one more comment?
Sure.
Again, some of these things seem like a lot of money, but if you look at the funding source, the only one that's being funded by long-term debt is the $400,000 for the seal coating. And going back to what Mr. Wagner said, you could argue that that's maintenance too, but we've long since moved seal coating into the capital world based on the fact that it does extend the life of a street by quite a bit over time. But the rest of it's all through the machinery and equipment fund. Doesn't mean it's free money. Every time we spend money from that fund, it takes away from what we can do in terms of replacement of vehicles, equipment, and machinery. But this has been planned for over time, and that's where those monies have been put in to ultimately do electrical and roofing improvements.
All right. Thank you. Anything further? Nope. All right. Thank you very much. Next up, technology and communications.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for giving a chance to present to you the capital improvement program for technology-related programs. We have 15 technology-related program, and then there's one that is communication-related. So I'm going to skip over the communication when we get to that because that's going to be presentations. So the first program is about the SAN disk capacity, and SAN is storage area networks, and this is the main storage that all of our servers use. And it's just that over time, on a yearly basis, you would see 15 to 20% utilization of the disk space. So we are at 64% utilization at this point. So the plan is to have an upgrade plan when we near the 80% point. Certainly you can go beyond 80% all the way to 90%, but that's usually around 80%. That's where the upgrades should be in place. And I mean, a couple of reasons to increase the disk capacity. One, of course, is to have larger disk capacity. And then the second reason is the I/O. So having more disk is kind of like having more paddles on a Dragon boot. So it has more spinning, so you can read-write files faster. So, and the estimated cost is $50,000 and for 2021. Any question about it? Yes.
Mr. Wetzel.
Thank you. How much space is that we're looking at?
Currently, we are at 170 terabytes.
Okay.
So the plan is to add another array of disks with the enclosure and whatnot. Again, we are actually looking at two plans. So if there's another second plan that, if you look at another plan that we have down the road is few improvement program down. There's a disk controller upgrade that we could be doing in another year later. So because they are back to back, so one option I could do is look at the disk capacity and the disk controller replacement, add the two costs together and see what is the best deal I can get. So that at the near the year end of 2021, we'll essentially, try to do the two together or have one that somehow work the best to our advantage.
So at this point, you don't know the size of the storage you're going to be adding?
Yes, it was a 10 terabyte disk unit times 12, so it's about 100 terabytes usable.
Okay. And in terms of the server space, the server room space, we got plenty of space in there?
Yes, it will take another, 2 use or 4 use at the most.
And how much do we have space in there yet?
Basically, when we move over here, we have only used about maybe 70% of the rack space on one of the rack. And then the other rack, we pretty much give it to communication to put the top half of that one rack with their communication stuff. And then the bottom half, we have some old equipment that we have pretty much retired, but we are hanging on to them just in case of old data or program that needs to be fired up just to get retrieval.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so the next program is about server hardware additions. Again, it's the same thing about capacity planning on a regular basis. We want to make sure that not just this capacity, do we have enough CPU capacity? So this is to insert another hardware, a server plate into the enclosure that we have. Again, I'm looking at two options. So one option is to insert another hardware plate into the enclosure. However, by doing that, you also need to license it with VMware license and operating system license. The other option that I'm looking at concurrently is to look at the 4.0 blade server that we have. So if we were to upgrade those blade server, so instead of the 8-core processor that were in them, if we upgrade them into a 20-core processor, but we would save money in terms of not having to buy the VMware license and the server operating system license and so on. So we're looking at those two concurrently. But again, just assuming a natural cost of doing business, you add another server plate. This is the estimated cost of the $42,000 for doing that. Any question on the server? All right, the next program is about the Microsoft Windows Server license upgrades. We are currently running mostly the 2012 R2 versions. Microsoft has a funny way of naming the server. 2012 R2 essentially is 2014, which they could have called that 14 and then you would not confuse. And Microsoft have a licensing that they give you 5 years of mainstream support, and then they give you another 5 years of extended support, or in short, 10 years in total. So the plan is to have in 2023 and to upgrade all the server licenses that we have. And the estimated cost based on today's license is $38,000. So, because no one knows what server 2024 to server 23 would cost today. So, but this is what the estimated cost.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. You said that it's 5 years of service and then it's extended service after that. Is there a cost on extended service?
If you buy them, yes, but we typically elect not to buy them. We have not buy the software assurance from Microsoft because the cost of doing that is very high. And the other thing is Microsoft is nice enough that they provide all the patches that you need online. So we have been able to download the updates. You might have seen the email that I send out every now and then, the quarterly updates. So we have been applying the updates, and those are no cost to us for doing that. So
the extended support doesn't cost anything?
That's correct. Only if you want Microsoft support line thing.
Thank you.
So the next improvement program is about Exchange server. Hate to say it's kind of sound like broken records. It's the same thing. We have Exchange 2013 license. So in 10 years, it get obsolete. So in 2023, we need to upgrade that server license. Estimated cost based on today's license cost is $22,000. And then the next one, we use Unitrans backup solutions. So we have a maintenance plan with the thing, and it's just that we are estimating that in another few more years, we may not have enough storage on the backup. So we would either need to buy a bigger box or buy a second smaller box to able to back up more data. So, and then the next one is the Cisco firewall upgrade. Currently, we are fortunate to have something called WISNet for our internet service provider service, and it can run 10 gigabits. I mean, with the last upgrade that we did, that is only 10 gig to our door, so to speak. Our firewall can only support up to 2 gig at the max, but with all the inspection that it does, when it checks the packets and whatnot, it can only do about 600, megabit, which is plenty fast. It's more than what we would need. But it's just that we are looking at, a few years out, hopefully the firewall hardware would be dropping. And at that point, we would be looking at buying that firewall upgrade. Roughly is at $60,000. That's kind of like a guesstimate because if you based on today's 10 gig, it's still $100,000 cost. But if you buy something in the midstream, 5-6 gig, so I'm assuming that 60,000 should buy us near the 10 gig if it's not 10 gig by that time. So questions on that? So next program here is a network penetration test. The security consultant would advise you to do a pen test once a year. But again, we try not to do that on a yearly basis because that's pretty costly. But at the minimum, we should consider every other year. So that's the reason that you would see there's one plan for 2021 and then another one for 2023 and then another one for 2025. Each time is about $12,000 to $15,000 each time when you do a pen test. So that's why I add $1,000 to the equation every year, just in case. Yes.
Mr. Wagner. Hit your mic.
Gee. Okay, I understand the necessity for that test. Can the utility piggyback on this?
I guess potentially we could have the same consultant do both.
Or there may be, maybe both of you would get a better price per unit if you did two at a time, right?
We can certainly look into that, yes.
Would you do that before the next meeting, before we close this out, please?
Okay. And the goal is to get an estimate if they,
Yeah, just get an estimate of what it costs to do it.
okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Witzel.
To piggyback off of that, my understanding, the library kind of does their own thing with their technology as well, is that right?
That's correct.
So in an effort to, again, try to piggyback and consolidate and maybe save, is there a way maybe to touch base with them as well? I think police and fire probably come through the city, so that's not an issue, but it'd be those big three, the utility, the library, and then the city itself that would be looking in. And as Mr. Wagner spoke, it may be wise, we can kind of, get a bundle deal. Everybody saves a little bit, and maybe even at that point, we could get to a yearly, because it does make me slightly nervous as a government entity that I understand we're trying to be very careful with taxpayer money and so on, but this is also security. This is pretty important, and so I cringe a little when you say you're doing it biannually, and I understand, but if we can get a good deal with working with the other entities, maybe we can up that a little bit and I'll sleep better at night.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. The next program is for the recreation software. This is a request from the Parks and Recreation software that they like to get an upgrade. Again, when they started this last year, and they think in 3 years' time they wanted an upgrade. Now it's in 2 years, so they estimated that to be about $10,000. Question. Then the next program is the BE 6000. It's a Cisco product called Business Edition 6000. It's the one that handle our call manager, the phone system, the voice over IP phone system, plus the video over IP system as well. The thing is, we purchased that software a number of years ago. With Cisco, it's hard to predict exactly when, so they will tell you about 5 years out, this is obsolete. So we have been informed a few years ago that this is obsolete, and now by 2021, the support has reached end of line. So, and the upgrade cost is $45,000. Then the next one is the Cisco wireless LAN controller. The access point that we have in multiple city buildings is all controlled by something called a LAN controller. And we put this controller in, by the time we replace them, will be at least 10, if not a dozen years. So in 2023 is when the support for that, wireless LAN controller would reach the end of life. It would be about $40,000 based on today's, a new LAN controller would cost. Question on that? Okay. The next one is, I was mentioning earlier, is the SAN controllers. So the way that the SAN work is there's a pair of SAN controllers, so that there's redundancy built in. So one controller were to fail, the other one would take in. Again, unfortunately, with equipment, there's always an end of service dates, and this end of service date would reach in 2022. The estimated cost about $76,000. So I was saying I would combine this money with this capacity upgrade and see if it makes sense to, take the two-part money and do a better deal out of the two set of money. If I could do that, then I would do that in December of 2021 and tap into both set of money. So, and then next three that I have, start with the spam filtering. DNS security, and then the enhanced security operations. Just so you know, I actually invited Marshall Utility and the library analyst when we were looking at the demo of these three products, because these three items are all security related. They might be using the same thing that we do, or sometimes different. Like library, they use the same antivirus software like we do. The reason is when we were looking at demo, we invite them in so that when the time to buy, we can buy together and get the lower, based on the number of quantity that we buy, we get another level of pricing that is lower. So for the spam filtering, we have been using Barracuda for a good number of years now. And we have received a lot of complaints from the staff that more and more spam are getting through. And in part is the spam that we have does not have AI or artificial intelligence built in. The only thing that you can do to have AI built in so that it's more effective in getting a lot of the spam email out is to get some kind of cloud base. So what I've looked at is I've looked at Proofpoint and Mimecast as two potential replacement in the price range that we can afford. I mean, something that seems affordable. So again, during that process, it was not a decision making. I was just looking at, okay, how much would this product cost and see how it work in general. So to go with either one of them, the highest of the two is 12,000. So if you approve this, then we'll zoom in and hopefully, narrow down which one to go with. Next one is the DNS security. And what it does is when our users or even our server, when they go out to the internet, it's going to do a DNS check and stuff like that. So in order to do that, you need the Cisco umbrella. They have a team of security experts sitting in their wherever they are, data center, and they mark the sites that are bad and stuff like that. So by having this open DNS, subscribing to Cisco umbrella, or even Mimecast has that feature. So if you buy Mimecast for spam filtering and that, potentially you get a better deal. But would that be a best product to go with or not? That remains to be seen. So the $15,000 that I've budgeted is the highest of the two, just so that we are not making the decision while we are just putting a number together. So when we do get the budget approved, you may be surprised that at the end we didn't spend the whole 15,000 or the 12 previously, and the reason is we were trying to find something that work to our advantage, but can do both. So, and then the next one, again, I skip over the communication one, and the last one is the enhanced security operations. Again, this is in response to some of you might remember. Sometime in 2019, there were several attacks against city and county, network in general. You might have heard of city of Oshkosh, I think city of Racine, and many others outside of Wisconsin even being attacked. And with some of the experience that I've seen, like the Marshfield Clinic, I visited the data center that they have right here in Marshfield. On a couple of occasions over the years, they actually have a network, they call that NOC, or Network Operating Center. So they essentially have a team of IT specialists who are monitoring the network and activities that are going on their system. And certainly a small data center that City of Marshfield has, it will be way overkill to have something, like that. But in order to do something similar to that, to more effectively fend off, the viruses or attacks that are hiding in your networks and whatnot, there's something called that you can hire the security operations center. It's called the SOC as a service. So this program here, certainly I do understand if you do shut it down. But again, it's a SOC as a service so that you are essentially hire someone to bring in the sensor. Essentially what they do is they will bring in one or two sensors and put it in the networks, and they would sense all the activity that we have going on. And it's not humanly possible to do. Let me give you an example. They give us an example of a 250 users networks. There's essentially like 3 million events. If you add up all the events that the server collect in a week, there's like 3 million events. In meantime, the city is subscribed to MS-ISAC with all the warnings. Oh, don't go to this website and don't do this and so on. But there's no way for us to correlate the two. So what this SAC as a service can do is they bring in the software, their secret sauce. They can essentially correlate the activity that you have on your servers, aggregate all the event logs, and then they will bring in the ISAC, the warnings and whatnot, essentially all the warning messages that are out there, all the bad actors, websites, those ISAC, meaning that the Internet Security Center provide to the city, while we have that, but we could not correlate it, but with the SAC as a service, they have the tool to allow us to do this automatically, meaning that there will be a software that kind of check, okay, is this one of the bad actors? If it is, it will shut down the connections. Not only that, it will also detect any suspicious activities. For example, if all of a sudden you have a large transfer of file, it will stop that transfer and send an alert message to IT and say, hey, did you intend to transfer, 2 gigabyte worth of your database out to somebody? And that would stop those kind of events from happening. And I do understand it's a costly option for $48,000 year one. And the ongoing cost is going to be $42,000 and change. I forgot to change the one that is showing at the bottom at 62. That's was wrong. It should be 42. So, but anyway, any question on that? Again, this is by no means 100% guarantee we never get attacked. No one can say that for sure, but it's just that it will greatly minimize any blind spot that we would have.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. So they're providing the 24/7 monitoring, and then if they do, you said if they do find things, they can shut it down and send a message. Does that mean you're going to have staff that are on call per se 24/7?
We are already on call.
Okay.
As of today. So.
Okay. So then they wouldn't be holding these things off until the next morning during business hours. They'd be getting a hold of somebody and you'd be addressing these issues immediately.
That's correct. I mean, it's probably on the safe side that we would want this activity stop.
Yes.
Even if it's been delayed, so the file that we were trying to transfer would not get sent till the following day, following business. Even if that were to happen, it's better than having sent something off and then there's no way of undoing that. Just so that you know, anything that you send over the internet, once it's out somewhere, there's no such thing as a clean delete. If someone can promise you deleting that's may or may not actually happen. So,
yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any?
Mr. Budke.
I have to go back in history a little bit. Ing was probably here, not in the position he's in, but boy, and Mike can remember this, these poor people that were the head of the technology, they got beat up big time from the council. Part of it was because of the lack of understanding on the council because it was new to everybody. But I have to say this, Ing's not paying me off or anything to say good things about him, but over the years that I've been on the council, I used to get staff complaining about different stuff. And since he's been in this position, I have not had one. So put that in your fuzzy good file there, Ing. So thank you for a job well done. And, you can just tell by the way Ing talks here, he's passionate about this. He's very knowledgeable on all this stuff. So I think, I know we have a good man. Thank you.
Thanks. I forgot there's one more. That's the EBS, Enterprise Business Software. This is the continuation of, we are into, for this CIP, we will be into year 2. So we started this year 1 to this year for the enterprise business. So 142,000 was budgeted, previously for 2020. And then the remaining numbers here would add up to about $650,000. That is to replace the core business software they use, which range from the accounting software, payroll, business license, permits, inspection, and so on. Any question on that project?
Mr. Whitson.
Thank you. Intel Technology is my thing. What software are we using again for this?
I guess we call it the term EBS or enterprise business. It's
What's
just a
the
generic
product?
term to cover the whole software package that we need from financial accounting. So we essentially have selected Tyler Technologies for the financial accounting, payroll, and a few others, integration point. And then we have Kronos selected for the timekeeping piece.
And they talk well together?
Yes, because before they have their own product, Kronos was their primary timekeeping software. And then we have Evolve Planning for the permits and inspections. And the reason is we have visited 3 locations before we came to the conclusions of selecting Evolve Planning for the permits and inspections. Because Tyler does not have a very strong permits and inspection in play yet in Wisconsin. The only one that they have is in City of La Crosse. And we look at their demo and how they use it. We were not too impressed about what they have. But Evolve Planning appeared to be a much stronger. There were many more Wisconsin cities and counties using it. At the time before we even signed up, we learned that City of Neenah, City of Eau Claire, and a few others were signing up with Evolve Planning. So that kind of boosts the confidence to go with Evolve Planning for the permits and inspections. Again, the key point is a lot of this new software, I know some of you might be familiar with EBS. Didn't we just do that like 10 or 12 years ago? Yes, we did. But the software that we have back then wasn't as up to date as what we have today. With this round, the key thing is this round that we have will enable more transaction being done over the internet. So there will be more credit card payment that the city can receive. On top of that, it will allow more activity being done out in the field. So example would be inspector would be able to do the inspection right out in the field with the tablets. They will be able to click off things, and even before they get back to the office, assuming if there's a Wi-Fi connections or the 4G LTE connections, the department heads in the office could actually see the result of that inspection even before the person get back to the office. So those are the things that are, drastically different, if you will. If you compare the EBS that we have from a dozen years ago, it would be like having a vehicle from a dozen years ago to the vehicle that you have today. You got all the GPS, emergency brake and whatever feature that you need today put in. So that's kind of in a way to compare the EBS that we previously have versus what we are looking at when we finish with this.
And I see there's a lot of areas that are covered here regarding what this EBS provides. Does it also do employee reimbursement type things and those, or is that still going to be done paper?
It has that ability, but I don't think we included that as part of the initial deployment of the software. They do sell that kind of a feature. It's just that key thing is, does it worth buying the software? That we didn't get into. We were looking at the core business function that we have.
So there is the potential then down the road to maybe expand a few more modules, if you will. To that
Yes.
software. All right.
It will be amazing if you ever visit the Tyler Technology website. There's a lot more that if the city wanted to do, they even have a sales service financial report called the Scroda. Again, the bigger city use that. Again, it's not inexpensive. So just to warn you, if you want to go that route, but it can take the financial data that we have and make it a sales service that you can look at. Okay, here's how the city spend the money. Oh, I want to know, what do you mean by 5 million on public, safety? You click on that, it then zoom in and display more detail and so on. So it's all, AI built in to take the data that you have and drill down and so on. Again, that's the next add-on that we could consider should we get to that point. So Tyler, the reason that we have selected Tyler is if you look at the the kind of software available and modules that you can add on later on, should you decide to do that, they just have that much more. And it's a publicly traded company, so they have a lot of, money to keep going for a long term as well.
So we're not getting any of that data reporting stuff as a part of us either?
It will have, data reporting and so on. I'm just saying, for the bigger city, they use it to display even further, more self-service data beyond what a generic accounting software would do. So,
I have a lot more questions, but I don't think it affects our discussion here, so I'll hold off.
Any other questions? Nope. All right, thank you.
thanks.
And did you say Tom was going to go over the,
I believe so.
Yep, I'm here, Mayor. You hear me?
oh, there you are. Okay.
Yep, I'm here. Okay, I'll see if Steve has my piece up, but if not, what we're looking to do is replace the current broadcasting server that stores our broadcasting programs and gets the videos out onto the cable television, and it's for all our channels, 989, 990, and 991. These units are about 14 years old. There is two of them. Because of how they're structured, and the hard drive system is separated, which is quite old. There is no more support available from Latronics, and we also would like to replace the streaming device. It is a separate device, but that houses our Granicus server, and that is running a Windows 2008 server, which is quite old, and we were kind of lucky to get it back to work in here after about 4 hours of work. The other thing is there's a lot of time. If we go back to the broadcast server, we have to do things twice. A lot of all these new servers are able to take an HD file, which we use, and not have to convert it. So anybody that brings us a file, we have to convert it to a specific file to run, which takes quite a bit of work. All of our church programs come in different. The programs that we do here in-house are HD. We do have to put those down for YouTube, which we want to keep in HD, but for the broadcast, we have to put that into a standard definition. Now, this new broadcast server would be HD compatible, so if the cable station ever did change to HD, then we would be ready. And usually this system is more cloud-based out there. There's quite a bit of new ones out there that are able to store everything in the cloud, so it means that you can work more remotely than we do now. A little bit different in using our city system to get in. You're more onto the cloud system, similar to our digital signage platform. So we're looking to replace that, and that is different than what we did last May when we had to upgrade for our charter service. That is a totally different product, and that has worked flawlessly since we put it in last May.
All right, any questions? All right, thank you very much. We will go on to UW Stevens Point Marfield campus.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. I will start with our 2021 request. It's the replacement of a hot water heater for our domestic hot water. It supplies the Clark building, the Felker building, and the Leopold Science building. The existing hot water heater is original construction, 50 plus years old, and it's the old pump type, and we have an issue at times producing enough hot water to supply all of the three buildings, including the lab spaces, the restrooms. This hot water heater then would be upgraded to a new energy efficient hot water heater with a new pumping system, which would get us the hot water that's required for all of our facilities. Basically, the original construction of the buildings in 1964, again, it's Leopold, the Clark, and the Felker building, so that hot water heater would be for that area. In 2022, our request is to add some additional we have a computerized door locking, unlocking system right now, which it works on 9 of our exterior doors and 1 interior door on our lab spaces. This funding would be used to expand that to our most critical exterior doors. It works very well, the ones that we have right now. We're able to set time schedules for unlocking and opening doors without having to manually key open those doors or key lock those doors again. And in the instance, if we ever had an incident like we did last year, we would be able to do a complete shutdown, lockdown on those doors within a matter of seconds. We did change our policy last year, June. We do not lock or unlock as many doors as we used to. We keep those locked. But there is some exterior doors that it's absolutely necessary that we do key them open. So that would be an expansion of that system for basically for security. And then it would also help with our staff not needing to monitor and work on those doors every day. In 2023, we have a request for a roof replacement. That roof would be over our connector area. It's currently a ballast roof. We would be going to a solid rubber roof, fully adhered roof. And that was constructed in 2002 when that connector portion of the building was done. So we will be at a 21-year life. We've had some issues with it. Some of the steaming has come loose. We've had it repaired several times. But that would be then to replace the roof over the connector building. And also we have a request in there in 2023 to do some renovations to the Clark building. And that would include the Clark, the Felker, and the area that connects those 2 buildings. Would be basically to replace wall coverings, replace floor coverings, and then the biggest portion of that project would be to renovate and update the restroom facilities that are in that area to ADA compliance. Currently, they are not ADA compliant. These areas see the most usage by our students coming into the Solution Center. It is the administrative wing where we have a lot of guests coming in, a lot of meetings. So it's really a public area. So that funding would be then to renovate both of those spaces and again, do some upgrading on the restroom facilities, make them ADA compliant. In 2024, we have a request in there to renovate and upgrade our food service area, our kitchen area. It's currently used by our students, and we are currently looking for areas for storage, and we'd also upgrade the cooking surfaces, the cooling surfaces, and a servicing area. We had that project initially back several years ago. We had it a higher priority, but we're looking at that area right now, and we're very comfortable leaving it in 2024 for renovation, the upgrading of the kitchen. Also in 2024, we have a project of replacing 2 rooftop HVAC units. They were both installed in 1998, and that was with the construction of the connection between the theater and the library and the gym space. Both of those rooftop units had some repairs done to them in 2014 to try and get those to last. Again, we're having some issues with those units. They cool the classrooms that are in the connector area from the theater all the way to the commons area. They cool the commons area, the fitness center, the bookstore. So those funds in 2024 would then be to replace those 2 units, unit number 4 and 5. And then finally in 2025, we have 3 funding requests in there. One is to replace the flooring some flooring. It would be carpeting, mainly carpeting. We would take the carpeting out and replace that with LVT or tile flooring, which is much easier to maintain, has a better appearance. Again, that carpeting and there is also some tiled floors that we'd like to replace, is original construction from the 1970s when that area was constructed. And then we'd also take some carpeting that's in our commons area, remove that, and also install vinyl tile in that area too. Then we have a project down by our athletic fields where the tennis courts are. Basically, there's two main projects. There's currently a wooden fence that separates the parking lot from the athletic fields, the soccer fields, the baseball fields, and the tennis courts. The intent would be to remove that wooden fence and replace it with a chain link fence for a lot of reasons, but mainly for the security of the people that are utilizing those facilities. We would hope that a chain link fence would have a higher security rating in keeping cars and vehicles off of those fields. We've had some problems in the past where the vehicles would drive through that wooden fence, get out onto those fields, do some severe damage. Fortunately or unfortunately, a few years ago, we had a continuating problem out there, and the Marshall Police Department was able to work with us and catch the individuals that were doing that. But we would really like to secure that area with a chain link fence. And then also the parking lot that's adjacent to that area next to the tennis courts. That parking lot at that time is going to be ready to be basically milled in place and re-asphalted. So that funding would be for the installation of chain link fence and to refurbish that parking lot surface back to new asphalt surface. And our final project in 2025 then would be to do some needed work in our arboretum. As you know, we have a very beautiful arboretum with a trail system. And what's happening is we have some drainage issues. We need to replace some culverts. We need to replace and install some new bridges. And then basically put some gravel across the major portion of those trails. So that funding and then would be for basically for drainage improvements and trail improvements in our arboretum.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Mr. Butke.
Just a comment, Brian. I'll bet you that new hot water heater will not last 50 years like the old one. That's amazing.
Yeah, what we're planning to do, Alderman Butke, is we want to tie the new hot water heater into, we have hot water boilers downstairs. We want to tie that new hot water system with the pumping into the hot water boilers, which will make it more efficient, which will be able to get us the supply of hot water in a lot quicker manner than we're getting right now. And the supply will be there when we need it. So, and it's critical because it's the most populated buildings that we have on campus, including our lab spaces, some of our lab spaces.
Thank you, Brian.
The STEM building, obviously, when that was constructed in 2017, that's all new hot water heaters over there. So that supplies the labs, the restrooms, everything very efficiently, but we need to upgrade in this one. That's why it's priority.
Thank you. Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. A couple quick questions. You're wanting to renovate a kitchen. How old is that kitchen? Your notes say that it hasn't been touched since it was put in, but I don't know what that timing was.
Yeah, that whole area down there was part of the expansion when they did the connection on the buildings in '98. So that really has not been touched since '98. And we've had some minor replacements of some equipment, but basically the equipment that there is the original equipment when that was constructed.
Okay.
Really the main issue is serviceability for our students and the staff and the faculty that use that kitchen area. If you're familiar with it, it's a very small space, and we'd like to at least expand it to get a nice serving area instead of basically having everybody come into the cooking area, servicing, and the people that are using that area, so that the service area could be moved out of the cooking space out more into the commons. So we do a good job on keeping it clean, but again, the equipment really needs to be updated.
So
and the area expanded for storage.
Where is our enrollment now in comparison to what it was in 98?
The enrollment is up, and talking with our campus executive, the predicted enrollment for this coming fall is actually up also. So it's very encouraging. It's not just on our campus, it's on the Wausau campus and the main campus. So we're encouraged with the incoming enrollment so far today. So.
Okay. Another project you had listed was flooring in the commons area. Can you explain where that commons area is? Is that just outside of where that kitchen area is?
Yes.
So
the commons area, there's an upper commons and a lower commons. The lower commons is adjacent to the food service area. The upper commons is basically where students and staff will dine. That's on top of the steps. They also dine on the lower level, but that's a tiled floor, and the upper part is carpeted, and it's next to adjacent to the doors or the south courtyard, which is a very inviting area also. And then adjacent to that is the bookstore. So you have the bookstore, you have the food service area, the kitchen, the lower commons, and then the upper commons.
So if I'm correct, that's an area that's significantly used for university events as well as for things in the community, such as the cultural fair. And what you're looking at doing is removing carpet, which is a sound deadening material, and putting in tile, which is going to cause more echoing. Have you considered what additional needs are going to be needed to deal with the acoustic situation once that change is made? And is that reflected in this expense?
Yeah, actually, the lower commons area, which is the wider expanse, which is used for just a multitude of public and private events, that is completely a tiled area, 100% tiled. And then the upper commons area, that is a combination of tile and carpeting. And what we would be looking at is not totally removing all of the carpet in that area in the upper commons, but we would be looking to where the most foot traffic is. We would be replacing that carpet with tile, and then leaving the carpet underneath the tables and the meeting areas and the small study alcove that's up there. That would all remain in carpet. Just basically the main travel areas where we're seeing the most wear on the carpet, getting to and from those areas.
Okay, one final question regarding budgeting. The prices you gave, does that represent half the cost of the project that we would be responsible for, or does that represent the entire cost that would be split between us?
Yeah,
and the county?
the numbers you are seeing would be the city's portion of that. All of those projects, as you were visualizing them tonight, would be doubled. Like the hot water heater, you're being asked to fund $8,000. The actual cost of that project is $16,000, and right down the road. So What you're seeing is half of the cost of each project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Get it? Okay. Any further questions? Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to wastewater.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have 5 projects that I'll be presenting tonight. The first one is the Manville Lift Station replacement. That's out there at the intersection of Highway 13 and Mann Street, almost to Spencer. This is actually a 2-year project. We're in the first year of the project this year. We hired a consultant to go through and evaluate the best type of station we should put in there. Currently, we have confined space issues. We have to crawl down into the lift station every week. And we'd be converting it to a more standard dual pump submersible station. Brian's got me beat there. This station's only 41 years old. So that one's been on the CIP for a while, so next year will finally happen. The guys will be pretty happy about that. The next one is a little bit more of a complicated one. We call it the phosphorus removal improvements. What happens here is the new limits for the phosphorus, like Tom talked about with the TMDL, are coming, and for us, they're in 2023. We had estimates from 3 different engineering firms that range from 27 million to over 35 million to do the improvements, and we thought we could do it easier than that, cheaper than that. We switched over to biological phosphorus removal, and which is going to save us tens of millions of dollars. But in the meantime, we still have a plant that's 20 years old, and some of the aerators, we were like the last plant in Wisconsin to get this form of an aerator, and there's 2 generations newer now. And we're having problems with like some of the motors that we're using are not very efficient at all. They were efficient for what they were back then. So we want to be able to replace some of these and save some money because the aerators run 24 hours a day. So it's kind of an efficiency age thing and trying to fine tune, make that BioP work better all the time. So we hired an engineer. He came up with a plan. He wanted us to spend $3.5 million last year. Well, we don't have that kind of money laying around. So we came up with a 5-year plan, and we're just going to do what we can with the money we have each year. So we actually are going through right now, updating that plan. We had some problems working with IT. Our inside fiber loop at the plant decided to start giving us trouble. So we have to update our plan that we're going. So that's how that one sits. The next one is our vehicles, which are new in the CIP. You may not know the building inspector and is funded by developmental services, but the plumbing inspector is funded half by wastewater and half by development services. The reason is I need someone to inspect all the laterals, whether they're new laterals for new houses, replacements or repairs. I need someone to inspect them. So I pay for half of his wages and benefits. We have kind of an unwritten policy where everything inside the building and what he wears, development service pays for, like his computers and his clothes. And in return, I purchase a vehicle for him. Works out good. We're happy both ways. So his vehicle is coming up in 2021. It's a 2008 that we bought used, and it's pretty tired. So he wants to upgrade that one. He wanted to upgrade it last year, but it wasn't in the CIP, so he had to wait. 2022, that's our jet vac truck or combination truck. We couldn't meet our goal last year for the amount of footage to clean, and just simply because the truck was broke down too much. U-joints go out, you just can't go anywhere. We had a fault in the wiring harness. We had a nitrogen sensor that went out. We just last month had the turbo went out on it, so it was up in Mosinee. So they're not necessarily expensive. They're not free, but they're not expensive, but it's broke down, we can't use it. So we had that in 2023 and we moved it up to 2022 for that reason. And then the last one, 2025, that's our truck 94. That's our lift station truck that services the lift stations. If a homeowner calls with a sewer backup, that's the truck that rolls because it's got the camera and the cleaning equipment in it. And it's also our main snowplow vehicle. So that'll be 10 years old at that point. And it has a lot of extra flashing lights on because it's used at night an awful lot for service calls. Next thing is the Lincoln Avenue lift station. That again is 41 years old. It was put in the same time as Manville was. Back in 2013, we replaced the force main that runs underneath Lincoln Avenue. And the extra money that we had left out of that loan was to pay for new pumps down in the basement, but we couldn't fix anything else. We didn't have any more money. So we put it in now to upgrade the electrical controls. It's going to need some engineering because it's going to be a total revamp and pull out everything old and put in new. So we have that for 2024.
And the last thing I have is Northeast Force Main. Northeast Lift Station is at the corner of Galvin and McMillan, way in the northeast corner of town. And that is the lowest spot of the city, and it pumps from there 2 miles all the way up, and it discharges to a gravity line just past the railroad tracks between Foremost Foods and Masonite, Marshfield Door. And we haven't touched it since 1976. Hasn't leaked, but we really have no idea what condition it is. And so we're going to hire a consultant to come in and evaluate what our best option is to take care of that. Everything I've talked about today is funded by wastewater fees, so it's your monthly utility bill that you pay. Nothing here is on property taxes. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Fire.
It's a 2014, the jet vac truck that we used. Yeah, 10 years is what they average. Well, you've been here a long time. But you are correct. We had the one that we leased for a while, for 5 years, and that maybe wasn't the best deal. And then we went with Big Blue is the last one we had, and then this is the Peterbilt. So the difference is from us, a lot of communities only do routine cleaning just in the summer months, and they don't get near as many hours on a truck. We've got a 7-page list that we do every month of routine spots that plug in town. We have backups, so we go through and try to take care of those. So this truck rolls 12 months a year, which is, it adds to it. Cold weather and water don't work so well.
Any other, Mr. Fire?
The reason I had the question
That's it.
sometimes you feel lemon.
No. It's a Peterbilt. It's been pretty good to us, but boy, lately, run of bad luck.
Any further questions? Seeing none? All right, thank you. Next, Steve, are you going over non-funded?
Yeah, let me go to that page in just a second. Let me scroll it up for you. Yeah, you take a look at the list of projects, and you're talking, 20-some million dollars, and it just makes you think that did staff throw everything, including the kitchen sink, in there? You have to realize that the needs across many departments are significant, and so there were items that were put in by department heads, and they were pulled out as part of the process. We had some review and discussion with all the departments and division heads. Ultimately, Dan Kinect is the one in charge of this project, and he came up with some ideas that he ran past people, and the list that you see there of reductions, totaling, well, you can see the numbers there. There were some added along the way as well, but that shows the changes that were made from the original. I guess if you have questions on some of these, maybe there's a project or two in here that you have expected to be there. Maybe it was in there before and now it's being pulled out. I know there was concern expressed earlier, right from the beginning of the meeting, about a project that was moved from 2021 to 2025. So it's very possible that something you've seen before or it's been talked about in the past has been pulled off of the list that was submitted by department heads. I would take questions to the best of my ability on anything on this list, but we wanted you to see what was omitted in the final product that was given to you for consideration.
Any questions? Mr. Fire?
Steve, the taxi vehicles, that 214,000, does that have any effect on the state's portion to that at all, or does it reduce the amount of taxis we can replace?
Amy's there sitting in the room right now, and she does some great work on this. I think the thing is, at one point we put in 2 vehicles per year to be replaced, and ultimately we decided we could back off on that. And the number we ended up with, 80% of that share of what was cut was the grant portion. Only 20% was ours. Amy, am I on the right track?
Yes, we just kind of, from purchasing 2 was originally in there for each year, and we're going to purchase 1.
Okay.
Anything else?
Anything else?
Let me chime in on one more thing. You look at the reduction in asphalt surfacing. Part of that is a little bit deceptive in the sense that Dan had put in the original CIP to increase the amount every year of asphalt mill in place and resurfacing. And the reason is because we keep targeting $2 million a year. And, you know, Dan has said to me for a while, $2 million doesn't buy the same amount of street resurfacing in 2021 that it did in 2015, for example. So even if we keep trying to do $2 million a year, we're actually falling behind a little bit. But when you look at the numbers we're bringing forward, and it's already been commented on by some of you at the earlier meeting, you know, it's a push to try and make this work and stay within the borrowing expectations that we've set in cooperation with a new 5-year plan. So that idea of being able to fund more than $2 million a year in asphalt mill in place and street work, you know, had to take a hit, even though it was a good idea to put it in there and see how far we could go with it.
All right, seeing no further questions in on that, we'll go on to item E, which is identify and discuss possible changes desired by the mayor and council members. And I will say before we start that off with any of your input, Steve, you and your staff, the department heads, and Amy's help on this as well. It is very clear that you all worked very, very hard on this. And the amount of thought that went in, and one thing that was very nice to see is how cost conscious everyone was. So Steve and all of your staff, very well done.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate that very much, and I'll pass that on to the rest of the department and division heads and other staff who are not on this call. Thank you. That's well received. I might say at this point that, you know, this is kind of an awkward moment. You know, we're at the end of 2 meetings. I think we met for about 2.5 hours the last time and about an hour and a half so far. This is now your decision where to go with this. You know, you can come up with questions and discussion. You can ask for more information. You can suggest, you know, further reductions or changes, and Amy is here to take the motions that would make those adjustments. On the other hand, you can certainly at some point turn it back to staff and say, you know what, we'd like you to further trim this by X amount of money or whatever, and throw something back at us to meet what we believe are the reasonable spending limits. So really the sky is the limit in terms of where you want to take this at this point, whether it's tonight or later, but this is your plan ultimately, even though staff has proposed it. We want to hear whatever modifications you want made or whatever ideas you want to bring to us for changes as well.
And with that, we'll open up the floor to the council. Any questions, concerns, revisions? Mr. Wagner?
You were just waiting for that, right? But thank you, Your Honor. There was some concern expressed when we started this process about the uncertainty about what was going to happen with revenues and how much money we're going to have next year and what the ability of our taxpayers to carry any burden are. And at that, I asked Steve Barg to prepare for me a list of 2020 projects which haven't been done, which have not been spent yet. And with the idea that if those projects could be moved to next year, we could be paying for those projects with money that we already taxed this year. We wouldn't have to tax anything additionally in 2021, for the 2021 year. There are a number of projects that are doing that. There are a lot of them. Basically, because they're all funded by different sources, I had to try and concentrate on those that were done, those were funded by tax levy. And those tax levy, there was about $400,000 worth of them that were funded by tax levy that have not yet been done, or at least as of the date of this report that he gave me. This was at 5/22, so they may have been very conscientious and started the project since 5/22. But I don't know. I keep looking for ways that we can save money, and then for the taxpayers. And on it occurs to me that the projects that we're going to be funding, if we accept the projects if we accept everything that's on the table right now, the taxpayers will feel the brunt of that in 2022 because the debt service won't take so it won't take effect until 2022. But they will feel the impact of anything in tax levy on 2020, on their tax bill in January of 2021. So the idea is to, if I were going to make cuts, I would zero in, not on specific projects, but maybe on specific departmental requests, and picking on the largest funded departments first and say, okay, we want you to reduce your project by $100,000, reduce your expenditures and tax levy by $100,000. And we won't pick the projects. You pick the projects that you didn't want to fund, that you would cut to get that down to that. That's, I'm trying to look at this without going and say, well, cut $2.98 off the cemetery. You know, I'm trying, that's the kind of thing I think that we could sit here for weeks arguing and we will argue. Trust me, there'll be arguments about it if we try and do that. But I think instead of taking that approach, we've got to go back to a little higher altitude and do it. Aside from that, I'd like you to decide whether or not, and I'll be happy to make a copy of this, or I think Steve, or ask Steve to send the copy of this report that he sent me out to you, and you can decide whether or not there's anything in there that you would like to try and carry over. And I think we should do that for the next meeting. I'm not prepared to start. I didn't bring my meat axe with me tonight. Let's put it that way, okay? I didn't want to go start chopping anything tonight. But I think I want us to think in terms of what we can do, what processes we might be able to use to lessen the burden on our taxpayers in 2021. Thank you.
Mr. Fire.
Somebody asked, you have to explain to me, if you're not going to do it in 20 and you're going to move it to 21, what happens to 21's project?
But one thing we do know for sure is whatever projects we're going to kick to 2022 are going to be more expensive than they are today in 2020. And all of the projects that we have were already done. And one thing we consistently do is we ask the staff, cut and be conscious of it. And I think with the brilliant job that they did, and as we saw staff present, they were very conscious of the cost. And I think now when we constantly ask them, cut, do more, cut, and now we say, go cut some more. I don't know, I guess I would have to understand, I think like Mr. Fire said, if we're going to take a project now in $2020, it's not going to be it's not going to be less expensive in 2022 to do the same thing. So actually it would be costing more to do the same project. I don't know. That doesn't, I appreciate your point. Nick?
Well, in addition to that, Mr. Mayor, since I've been on the council, I've heard about the past practices of deferring until things are in such bad shape that it costs a lot more to do the repairs or the replacements of those items that have been deferred over and over again. So I would be opposed to just deferring everything by a year. I think that we can come up with some better ideas.
Anything further? Mrs. Spiros.
Yeah, I kind of like I'm not sure about the first part of your proposal. I would have to kind of mull that over and probably think about that a little bit harder. But I do like the idea of looking at each department and starting, maybe with the high spenders like you had mentioned, and just asking them to come in at a lower budget and making the cuts where they see fit. This is, it's a Christmas list. Every kid's going to ask for everything they can get. And I think a lot of parents are going to cut those Christmas lists down this year. It's just the unfortunate, the way the economy is going to go. So I do kind of want to look at that and see if there are just some really blaring things that we as council think could cut. I'm not going to literally go through that list and propose those. I've tried that in the past. It never seems to work out. But I do think that some of these requester, I mean, some of these are asking for a lot of money. And, I know that there were things that were already taken off the list. But for example, if this had not already been removed, I mean, the fire department was asking for $500,000 for a training facility. I just I think that's a ridiculous luxury. I mean, yes, it's been removed, but I believe there are probably some other luxury things in there that they could look, or they could at least delay. I also agree that sometimes we do put projects off too long and the expense of replacing them ends up higher. So that's why I think it's important that we just look at the general numbers. We go back to each department head and probably ask them to cut a little bit more, and they can decide which projects they need to cut. What those numbers are, I think we need to come to a consensus on that.
So would that be the general consensus then of the council, is to accept what they've given us, but send it back to them for further review? Mr. Witzel.
I do have one specific request, and I know everybody knows it's coming. East 17th Street, Maple to Peach, that's been pushed off for a decade. I would really like to see that be done. It's my understanding that there's the potential, maybe getting something coordinated for as early as next year. That particular road and what it feeds and the traffic level on it and the safety issues with it being a ditch street with parking on one side, I would like to see that moved, and I would even be looking at, in order to kind of keep things balanced, maybe pushing some of the asphalt street surface mill in place work that's slated maybe to a little bit later year. I realize it's going to cause some of the streets to go a little bit longer, but that 17th Street is a decade overdue, and I really think that needs to be a priority. Regarding general reductions of the departments, I'm interested in hearing what people have suggestions.
Mr. Turchi.
We did talk internally and discussed with staff to whether or not we could get something like this done and completed in 2021. And we did feel that we could do that and get this project actually built in 21 if you decided you wanted to go that route. Would probably be a matter of bouncing a few asphalt projects around, as well as some other projects at like street openings and stuff like that to get this funded in this earlier year, which we'd have to take a look at if you wanted to go that route.
So are we looking for a motion on that then? From a procedural perspective?
I would think so. If you want a motion to move that up, sure.
I would make a motion to move that up and juggle what you need to make it happen.
Do we put juggle in the motion?
Yes. Are you?
Is there a second to?
Are you going to want it moved to 2021?
Yes.
Is that what you're thinking? Okay.
Yes.
Is there a second to juggle? This is a second by Mr. Bargender. Any discussion?
All right. As part of that, what we'll do is we'll take and come up with an idea of how to make the numbers work and bring back that to the next meeting, if you don't mind.
So you can do your juggling?
Yes.
And then bring it back?
Yeah, so you know what's going on at the other end of it too.
Sounds great, thank you.
All right.
Nick, did I see your hand up or? Okay, all right. Anything further? Any further discussion on that? Seeing no further discussion, please vote.
Fire.
Yes.
Paschal.
Yes.
Rosendich.
Yes.
Bargender.
Yes.
Wagner. Yes. Witzel.
Yes.
Fisher.
No.
Spiros.
No.
Budke.
Yes.
Passes.
And that motion carries 7-2. So then with that motion, Tom, you can get that back to Steve, and then Steve, would there be two things based on the council's direction tonight, which would be to get us some information on moving that up, and then as well discussing with your staff, the cuts that can be made, and then give us an update to that?
Yeah, definitely, Bob, definitely. And as far as potential future cuts, I know that Dan had come up with a few. I'm aware of a couple. I think your comments tonight, everyone was very good. People who said that there's a certain amount of projects that, we really need to get done, and we're just deferring maintenance, kicking it down the road. And we need to get those accomplished, I agree. But then there's always things that are, even called out in the plan that are maybe a lower priority that don't reach up to that level that we can look at perhaps seeing if they can be trimmed. Before we wrap up, do you have any particular target in terms of amount of money you're looking to save, or are you just kind of putting it to us to figure out what realistic cuts are possible?
Rebecca, did you have your, Mr. Bedke?
I'll wait for Mr. Wagner to take a seat. Ed, on your idea about making some cuts and asking department heads to do that, do you have a percent or something in mind?
Please.
I've been looking at some things at it, and I don't have a final answer for you. But for instance, I would even like to look at it in terms of saying, okay, we've got I was looking at long-term debt for the amount that we're going to do in long-term debt for 2021. It's $6,100,000. $3 million of that is pool. We could say we want to reduce the amount we borrow by 10%. We could say we want to reduce the amount of the money funds funded by tax levy by 5%, 4%, whatever. We could do that. Then you could say, that way you wouldn't have to say, you wouldn't have to pick on a department. The projects are going to cost more? Maybe not. We just heard a diatribe about how we got to bid now because the contractors are hungry and they're going to be hungry next year too because they aren't going to be able to get it done by winter. The truth of the matter is, not one of us in this room has a crystal ball that can tell us what those projects are going to cost. Thank you.
Mrs. Spiros.
I think I bring this up every time we do this too, but I noticed that we have a lot of vehicle replacements, and they're coming from all different departments. And listen, a vehicle from 2008 that we bought used, honestly, that needs replaced, right? And I do understand that they all follow a schedule of replacement of their vehicles. And I get that, and I think that's a great idea. But I would be interested to see if some of these vehicle replacement schedules couldn't be bumped back a year. Couldn't we extend those replacement vehicles by just a year? In most cases, that probably could happen. So I would like for all of the department heads that are asking for vehicle replacements to kind of produce a report on that, on whether they feel like those schedules could be bumped back a year of replacing those vehicles. And because that's a considerable amount of money. And if we could look at that, I would appreciate it. Thanks.
Mr. Fire.
The problem you have with vehicles, especially when it comes to the law enforcement, they're run 24/7. They actually don't shut off. And even the county, we know that if you go past a certain year, the maintenance on that vehicle, they just eat you alive because they're really expensive to maintain when they start getting up. And it's not the length of the miles, it's the miles they put on. That can be a problem. The maintenance can really get you.
Okay, so in follow-up?
Please.
So just in follow-up to that, appreciate that. And I probably agree with most of that. And that's why I would like for those department heads to come back and give us a report on what they think they could do with that.
Mr. Budke.
Yeah, I would be willing to look at that. The one department that's different there is wastewater. That is his purchases with the Mack truck. Very important with the collection system. They've avoided a lot of basement backups, so on and so forth. And that's not a tax dollar thing. So if we're going to do that, I would not want that included in.
Thank you. Mrs. Spiros.
Yeah, and follow-up, I do agree with Tom on that. I think that the wastewater, it seemed to me that their request all seemed quite justified. So I would exclude them from that request also.
Nick.
The other thing I'd like to see from probably Steve is some type of estimate of just what we're looking at it for for income, are we going to have a much lower income level than we did in previous years?
Okay, so is he? Oh, Steve, go ahead.
Thank you. In response to your question, Nick, yeah, I mean, I think we are looking at a concern for 2021. We've talked about this at the last couple of meetings. The state has pretty well pledged that they're going to make good on all their promises as far as the amount of shared revenue and transportation aid we get for 2020. But we all know that COVID-19 is having an impact on state collections of sales tax and income tax. So 2021 might be a different story. We'll have to monitor that. I just want to remind you again, when you look at the numbers, our intent has always been to borrow less than we pay in principal on existing debt. And if you remember when we presented this the first time, we have that met for 4 of the 5 years, but in 2023, we're not even meeting that. So we've known from the start of coming to you back in May that, you know, we want to do some work. We need to do some work. If not now, we'd have to do it next year anyway to try and make the picture come into full compliance with our own guidelines. So I think your comments are very good. I think we can find ways to trim some money, and I think you'll be pleased with that. As far as the vehicle replacement thing, I think each one is different. I think some cases, you know, we really need to keep up on those because the useful life, I mean, the life of these vehicles is compromised by the hard, durable work that they get. But then there's other cases where just because a vehicle, you know, would normally be replaced in 10 years, and that's what they say the useful life is, or a piece of equipment for that matter, doesn't mean you can't get 12 or 13 years, you know, or even more sometimes out of that piece of equipment. You have to look at the maintenance records. Is it costing us more than it's worth? But I think those are good questions. So definitely have some homework that we can do.
So is it is the council asking, do you want to bring back all the department heads to go through very quickly what they can do, or do you want to give it to city staff and say, give them a target of, say, go 10% lower or 5% lower or whatever your discretion is, and so then they can do that and then just come back at one time? What do you all want? Mr. Wagner.
Yeah, just to see what could happen, I'll make a motion that we reduce the amount of long-term debt by 10%. That'd be $600,000. The other thing about that, I looked at tax levy, but the tax levy is so small in this that we're paying for the tax, we can't touch it. We just can't. So anyway, that's my motion.
So there is a motion to that. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Spiros. Any discussion? The only thing I'm sorry, Mrs. Spiros.
Yeah, the only thing about that, I mean, I don't mind looking at a percentage, certainly, but I'm just wondering how would that be divided among the departments, or how would they start to work on that and get that back to us within a reasonable amount of time?
Mr. Wagner.
Yeah, I think would leave, have Steve's leadership provide guidance to the department heads, and I suspect they'll be in a room together and hashing it out, playing let's make a deal. I'm pretty sure that's how it'll go. I don't think they need to come back to us one by one and tell us what they're cutting.
Then would you also want them, if you all approve this motion or whatever, them to come back then too to go through the vehicle situation? Or is it, or
I for sure still would like to see a report on the vehicle replacement. Yeah, I would like to see that, just because we really haven't taken the time as a council to look. Like I said, I've brought this up year after year in the CIP, and it's always kind of shut down because they have a schedule, blah, 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 blah. And, but I would kind of like to see that. And I do think it's important that we look at the maintenance. Have these vehicles required a lot of maintenance? Is there a lot of cost? Some of them maybe, just require their yearly oil changes and tire rotations. That's kind of what I'd like to see, yes, in addition to what Mr. Wagner is
so
proposing.
not necessarily everybody coming back here, but a report on that.
They don't have to come, yeah, no, they could just produce
Okay.
a report.
All right.
I don't
Fair
care.
enough. Mr. Budke.
And I normally would not be going along with this type of thing because it was set up for a reason. But these are special circumstances we are in for this next budget with revenue not coming in. We certainly know room tax is going to. So I want to look.
Mr. Bargender.
I guess, rather than a percentage, I'd like to see a line by line, what cuts available per department, what they could really cut out. It may be less than 10%, maybe 11%, maybe 12% might shake out on the end. So I just think, I mean, I see things like at the fire department, I see a UTV vehicle. What was it, $34,000, I believe. I mean, that can be put off. I mean, I think there was a lawnmower for $17,000. I mean, there's things like that. Line by line, we should be looking at more than a percentage, but I guess you can start at a percentage, but see if there's enough there. If there isn't, I guess we could always go back to the line by line. Yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out that, you know, I'd be receptive to a line by line if we can't get it done at 10%. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. Regarding the vehicle thing, I think it really, I'm going to be interested in seeing the report, and I hope that part of the report perhaps provides some level of maintenance expenses, because there are, you know, you can buy a vehicle, everything's perfect, and your yearly maintenance, monthly maintenance, whatever is all you pay. And you could buy another vehicle exactly the same off the same lot, and it could be a lemon, and it could have just ridiculous expenses. So if there could be, you know, some kind of information that justifies, you know, you've got 3 squads that are doing great, maybe we can push them off, or we have 1 squad that's just a total nightmare and we got to get rid of it. I mean, that information would help to, I think, justify as we're looking at those things as well.
Nick.
Thank you. Maybe I was blanked out or something when this occurred. Your proposal was to use this as a guideline or to use this as a hard and fast rule to cut that amount out? A guideline, okay.
Seeing no further discussion, do you want to amend the motion to throw in the report on vehicles? Or I think city staff, I think Steve gets that, but do you want to amend the motion?
Can you read the motion, please?
Right now, the motion is to reduce the long-term debt by 10%, which would be $600,000.
Please, Ms. Bradley.
Yeah, I'll make an amendment to the motion to look at, as a guide, as Mr. Wagner says, to look at the different scenarios there and see where we can make changes. And Mr. Bargender said it well too. So Amy, you got that, what I just said?
And do you want to add on the
report?
And to include a report.
There we go. All right.
Okay, so the amended motion then is to look at line by line and reduce what we.
As a guideline.
As a guideline.
See what we can do.
Maybe they can do more.
Okay.
As a guideline, and to add the auto report as well. And a second by Mrs. Spiros on that. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll vote.
You have to vote to amend the motion, right, first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was.
First the amendment, then.
Yeah.
So we have a.
You're going to have 2 votes. So first,
motion to amend.
You're going to vote on the amendment to use the 600,000 as the guideline and include the vehicle report.
Replacement report.
Okay. And then we'll vote on the motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So right now, just to be clear, we're voting on the amendment then to use the 10% as a guideline.
Yes.
And to add the auto report. There was a motion and a second.
Yes.
Right. All right. Seeing no discussion, then roll call vote, please.
Fire?
Yes.
Paschal?
Yes.
Rosendich?
Yes.
Bargainer?
Yes.
Wagner? Yes. Witzel?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Spiros?
Yes.
Budke?
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. And now the original motion.
Fire?
You want to?
The amended motion reads now that you're going to you're directing staff to use the $600,000 as a guideline to look at reducing the CIP and to ask them to include the report for vehicle usage.
Mr. Witzel.
Just a quick question. It was mentioned that the report of the vehicles could just be a report sent to us, but I think that this proposed adjustment to CIP would be something that we would want to have discussion about. I don't know if it's going to be a lengthy discussion or if it's going to be a discussion held in the confines of a normally scheduled council meeting. I guess I'm kind of curious, and it doesn't have to be discussed as a part of this motion, obviously, but just as a point of clarification before we close this meeting up and head out the door, I guess I'd like to know some info on how we're going to be presented that information and have an opportunity, because if we're using it as a guideline, I'm anticipating there's going to be some potential discussion of, let's put this back in or do more, something may occur at that point.
Steve, would you be able to have that by the June 23rd council meeting for discussion?
I'm not sure possibly, and that's a good question. I'm glad that Tom brought it up. I mean, do you want to be back in the venue of another special meeting like this, or do you want to be back within the confines of a regular council meeting, even if it takes, maybe a half an hour as opposed to having a special time? We may be able to do what you said just a minute ago, Mayor. We'll just have to take a look at as what needs to be changed and modified. And I guess I want a little bit of blessing or grace in case it's not something we can be done with by the 23rd. Let me bring up a couple of other points too, real quickly if I can. First of all, just a reminder, I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't scrutinize all of our vehicle and equipment purchases. But again, remember that the funding source for many of these is the internal service fund, where monies have been put aside over a period of 10 or 12 years or whatever the expected useful life is, so that when that time comes, it can be replaced. That doesn't mean that we can't get more life out of it, even just because there's been money put aside over these years for the replacement. It's still a really good question. But a lot of what you're talking about right now is not long-term debt, I don't think. I'd have to look back, or tax levy. The other thing I'd like to clarify is from what Mr. Wagner was making his original motion, when he said at one point 10%, and he also said $600,000. Are you just looking at 2021, or were you looking at 10% over the 5 years of the plan? Because 5 years of the long-term debt, 10% would be closer to $2 million. I just want to make sure I understand what you're hoping for.
2021 only.
Okay.
That's my biggest concern.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Sparrow.
Just in follow-up to what Tom's question, he brings up a good point. I do think there will be discussion probably, because this could kind of be extensive. I would propose that we do that at a special meeting, maybe on the 25th. Is that a Thursday? Because we seem to be doing these on Thursdays.
We could do that, but that's the same night that we're having that hearing on the PD-related issue.
So we could do that after the hearing then?
We could. We don't know how long that the grievance thing is going to last, but we could pick a time and say that we start at that time or following, I guess.
Or we could do it, I guess, on Wednesday. No, never mind. I think we need to look at a date. That's just mine.
Got to give them a date too.
All right, Mr.
But give them time too.
Yeah, I would not be able to attend that on a Thursday, and I don't believe Mr. Fisher either, because we have a Health and Human Services meeting with the county. So I would like to have a different date than that, but I agree with Mrs. Sparrow's.
Could we maybe do this? Could I ask for a little bit of grace? Dan is on vacation. He'll be back on Monday. He really has been the leader of the CIP project for the last couple of years. I want to sit down with him, share the concerns and the issues, and start working toward putting something together. Rather than set a date right now, can I follow up and have somebody from the clerk's office perhaps do a survey of what possible dates might be available at the end of the month and try and lock in on one?
Mr. Witzel.
I have a little bit of concern with that final week, sort of the end of the one and into June. The week of the 29th, I don't think is a good week to try to do that because there's the holiday week and it's just probably not a great option. But do you think this was something that could be thrown together by the 9th of July? And if so, is that going to cause a ripple effect in the budgetary process that I heard is starting to kick off?
The 9th of July is, I think, if I'm doing my math right, is 4 weeks from tonight, and there's no question that that would be doable, Tom. So that's probably a good alternative if we want to stay away from that week of June 29th. As far as the budget process, what we want to do is get this done in advance, because then we know what projects are going to have your blessing when we get to the budget time in latter part of September and into October. We would like to have gotten this done in June, but it looks like it's not going to happen. I guess the best thing I can say is we'll live with it. I don't want to rush this. I want to do it right. I think we've had enough discussion to where I want it to be something that the body feels good about. So if it can't be until the 9th, I'd like to have it before the 9th, but if that's the earliest day that can work, we can live with that.
Fire.
I won't make the 9th because we're having a business after 5 that night, the first business after 5 since it started. And I know that I'm going to have to be at the Legion business. Unless I can, we set that date. If we set it, if you could do it on a Wednesday, the 8th would be better. The 9th is, we just set that.
7th.
Do it the, what's that?
Do it 7th.
Do it the 7th.
But after finance, budget, personnel.
The other thing to consider with 10% is that of the budget for 2021 is 6 million or so. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the borrowing amount.
Yeah. 3 of it's the pool.
Borrowing.
Right.
It's not the full budget.
No, not the full budget. All right. Okay. And so we want to get 10%, or we want to get 10% off, 600,000 off of that. But remember, I think 3 million of that is the pool.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So that means, okay,
Bob, that's a very good point.
fair enough. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our city administrator just suggested doing a survey. I think that's a very good idea. So I think instead of trying to nitpick a date between 9 people on the council and the mayor, let's just allow the city administrator to conduct a survey and we'll pick the date. Thank you.
Fair enough. Did we?
No, we need to vote on the original motion now.
On
that
the
was
original motion.
as amended.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, then please vote.
Fire,
Yes.
Facial,
No.
Rosendich,
Yes.
Bargainer,
Yes.
Wagner, Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Spiros,
Yes.
Budke.
Yes.
Passes.
And that motion carries 8 to 1.
8 to 1.
Thank you. Any suggested items for future agendas?
Money tree.
No, doesn't appear to be. All right, how about a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Budke, second by Mrs. Spiros. Great discussion tonight. Thank you all very much. We are adjourned.